The business of making movies doesn't come cheap, and at the very end of the scale, the number just keeps ballooning every year. As such, there are a bunch of films on the horizon with budgets that leave you thinking, how on earth did they arrive at that number? I'm Josh, and today we're talking about upcoming movies with insane budgets. First up, we have Wake Up Dead Man at $210 million. Though the first two Knives Out movies are undeniably brilliantly made, star-studded affairs, they're also modest-ish productions by Hollywood standards, given that they're set in a limited number of locations and don't usually require all that much in the way of CGI. As such, Knives Out cost a mere $40 million to produce, and while the price tag for the Netflix-backed sequel Glass Onion has never officially been released, it's likely double that at most. But for the third entry into the franchise, Wake Up Dead Man, director Rian Johnson will be working with a hefty $210 million budget, according to Hollywood insider Jeff Snyder. To be clear, that's more than 5 times what the original cost, and while it stands to reason that Johnson, Daniel Craig, and the rest of the cast will of course be commanding hefty upfront paydays to offset the lack of theatrical residuals, it's still a kind of outrageous amount of money to spend on a murder mystery film. Now, of course, everyone and their mother will be watching Wake Up Dead Man when it releases on streaming on December 12th, but given the stonkingly huge budget, it does feel like they're leaving a lot of money on the table by not giving it a proper theatrical rollout first. Next up, we have The Adventures of Cliff Booth at $200 million. David Fincher and Brad Pitt are currently busy shooting The Adventures of Cliff Booth, the surprise sequel to Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it will see the legendary filmmaker command his highest budget to date. Reports indicate that the price tag will be around $200 million by the time the production is finished, blowing well past the $167 million that Fincher used with The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And this is an especially eyebrow-raising number, given that Tarantino's original film cost a far more reasonable $96 million. So we're more than doubling the budget for a sequel being made 6 years later, which seems just kind of wild, especially when you don't even have a key star to pay for this time around, because Leonardo DiCaprio at least won't have a starring role, if he shows up at all. Then again, Fincher's exacting filmmaking style never comes cheap, and if all the principal players are getting some fat upfront paychecks, the numbers will fast start adding up. Next, we have Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey at $250 million. Christopher Nolan may be about as reliable as blockbuster filmmakers get, but even so, he's literally and figuratively pushing the boat out for his new epic action fantasy film, The Odyssey. The film itself will cost a colossal $250 million to make, making it Nolan's most expensive film to date, edging just past The Dark Knight Rises' $230 million price tag. But Nolan sure knows how to spend a huge budget like this, and between the movie's stupendously stacked cast, practical sets, and location shooting, it's at least clear where the money is going this time around. That said, epics themselves have had a pretty tough run at the box office in recent years, and so there's no guarantee that The Odyssey will be among Nolan's bigger box office hits. And yet, Nolan carries so much cachet with even casual moviegoers that it's likely to be a financial success regardless. After all, at this point, it would be foolish to doubt the guy who turned a 3-hour J. Robert Oppenheimer biopic into a near $1 billion grosser. There's just nothing this guy can't do, and you should probably never bet against him. Next, we've got Masters of the Universe at $200 million. While there's no reality where a Masters of the Universe movie can be done justice on the cheap, there's probably some sort of middle ground that actually gives it a chance at profitability. Instead, Amazon's blockbuster adaptation of Mattel's iconic He-Man franchise has been given a wild $200 million budget, meaning that it will need to gross around $500 million globally to just be in the black. And even accepting the popularity of He-Man, that's a big ask, especially as the character isn't hugely relevant to younger generations. I know, I'm sorry to break the bad news. On top of this, the film will be set on Earth rather than He-Man's home planet of Eternia, a decision that's immediately irked a large swath of fans who might otherwise have been interested in the film. Even with the great Travis Knight directing, who previously helmed Bumblebee, this one's going to face one hell of an uphill struggle when it releases next summer, where it will be in direct competition with The Mandalorian and Grogu, Steven Spielberg's new untitled sci-fi film Toy Story 5, Supergirl, and Minions 3, all of which release within just 1 month of it. So yeah, get praying now if you want that sequel. Next up, Deeper, $275 million. With the Mission Impossible franchise now seemingly in his rear view, Tom Cruise is already hard at work on his follow-up tentpoles, the first of which was set to be Deeper, an underwater action thriller co-starring Ana de Armas and directed by Doug Liman. Though initially reported to cost an already pretty hefty $200 million, Cruise has reportedly pushed Warner Brothers to extend their coffers to $275 million as the production's planned start date has neared. However, the studio retaliated and set a hard ceiling of $230 million for the film, which has thrown pre-production into a tailspin and taken a planned shooting start of this very month off the table. At present, Cruise is looking for a new home for Deeper, while Lyman is already off pursuing other projects. Ultimately, it's just a case of whether Cruise can convince any studio to part with almost $300 million following the lukewarm box office performance of the final Mission Impossible movie, or if he'll have to produce it for a lower budget in the $200 million range. Either way, that's an outrageous amount of money for a totally original action thriller with no IP attachment. Next, we have Heat 2 at $170 million. Michael Mann's Heat remains one of the most acclaimed crime thrillers of the 1990s, hell, of all time. And against a $60 million budget, grossed $187.4 million globally, while remaining a supremely popular genre fixture over the last 30 years or so. Mann is currently gearing up to make a sequel based on his own acclaimed 2020 sequel novel, with Adam Driver and Austin Butler both rumored to star. Apparently, Mann submitted the first draft of his screenplay to Warner Brothers back in March, though the production's budget has since become a major sticking point in actually getting this thing made. Reportedly, the studio balked at Mann's initial $200 million ask for the film, which has prompted the director to try and get it done for just $170 million. Even that's looking too steep for Warner Brothers though, considering that it would require a global gross of around $425 million just to be deemed profitable. However, Warner Brothers is reportedly open to partnering with another studio on the project, and so Mann is currently shopping the script around to Apple in the hopes that they'll come aboard as a co-financer. And even accepting that Apple is basically playing with infinite money cheats enabled and has funded their fair share of acclaimed but unprofitable films in recent years, a $170 million heist flick without any sort of extra hook is a bit of a hefty request. So it's kind of, from a pure business perspective, easy to see why Warner Brothers is nervous, but hopefully this won't prevent Mann's long percolating sequel from finally getting made. Next up, The Bride, $80 to $100 million. Maggie Gyllenhaal's new reimagining of Bride of Frankenstein, The Bride, is said to be budgeted anywhere from $80 million to $100 million. But either way, it represents quite a gamble for the studio. For one, the Bride of Frankenstein story itself isn't nearly as iconic as the original Frankenstein, and Gyllenhaal's new take is reportedly a part musical, which will surely turn off many potential viewers. Sadly, I mean, why don't you guys like musicals? I want more of them. Come on, go out to see them. Perhaps somewhat tellingly, it was originally set to be produced by Netflix, but they bailed in favor of developing Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein movie instead, leaving Warner Brothers to step in. However, test screening reports suggest that the studio is nervous about how the film will fare with general audiences. And even if we accept the $80 million budget number lowball, it'll still need to gross around $200 million to be a success. And given that musicals, again, tragically, not based on marquee IP like, say, Wicked, have struggled massively in recent years, The Bride is almost certainly going to face a tough financial road ahead, no matter its reception. Next, we have Michael at $155 million. Next year's Michael Jackson biopic was always going to be pricey, and while it's not terribly surprising that it's going to be the most expensive musical biopic of all time, a $155 million budget can't help but seem extreme when it's compared to its peers. For context, 2018's Freddie Mercury biopic Bohemian Rhapsody cost $55 million, a figure that seems even more reasonable in retrospect, by the way, especially considering its lavish musical sequences and large cast. More recently, though, the Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown, cost roughly $70 million, which is still less than half of what Michael is being made for. And even accepting that Michael will likely be packed with dazzling set pieces, that's basically unheard of for a budget for something that isn't a CGI-lathered action movie. Plus, this figure was actually made public before significant portions of the film's third act had to recently be reshot, which may have well caused the budget to balloon even higher. While the commercial potential for an MJ biopic speaks for itself, the budget still leaves it exposed for a massive pile of money. It's not remotely surprising then that Lionsgate is apparently now considering splitting it into a two-part cinematic event in order to milk just a little bit more money from the entire endeavor. Next, we have Avengers Doomsday at $500 million plus. I know, this one's crazy, right? Avengers Doomsday is undeniably set to be one of the biggest movies of all time. And like all previous Avengers films, it's also going to cost the GDP of a small country to produce. With the last two Avengers films, Infinity War and Endgame, costing roughly $500 million apiece when all was said and done, it's naturally expected that Doomsday will at least match or surpass that figure. And while we don't have an official price tag yet, hell, they don't even have an official script yet according to reports, we do know that the Russo brothers will receive $40 million to direct the film, while Robert Downey Jr. will net $50 million for his role as Doctor Doom. And that's almost 20% of a $500 million budget down before you even consider the other lead veteran cast members, namely Chris Hemsworth, nor the literally dozens of familiar faces who will be showing up in some capacity. And so it's easy to see how Doomsday could easily end up costing considerably north of $500 million, which is a bit of a risky prospect given the rather underwhelming commercial performance of the MCU as of late. And finally, we have Clayface with $40 million. Alright, to end with, we've basically got the polar opposite of Avengers Doomsday, a film whose budget is insane not because of how eye-wateringly expensive it is, but how maddeningly low they've actually got it. A movie based on DC villain Clayface is imminently due to start shooting for release next September as part of James Gunn's DC universe. And it's also set to be a rare superhero movie with an impressively trim price tag. As of last year, anyway, Clayface was budgeted at just $40 million, a mere fraction of Gunn's recent $222 million Superman movie. It certainly makes sense to conceive a movie based on a more niche character with a smaller price in mind, but given the extensive transformation effects required to depict a character on screen like this, $40 million just seems a little too tight. I know we've been complaining about the opposite recently in this video, but a little bit more would be good, maybe. Of course, it's quite possible that the goopy clay effects will be incredibly limited and the film will instead mostly focus on the character's ability to shapeshift and assume the guise of anyone. Either way, a $200 million Clayface movie would have been mind-bogglingly irresponsible, so giving it the budget of a well-made horror movie like, say, Zach Cregger's Weapons does seem kind of more appropriate.